So I'm sorry that we didn't get to go through every example, but I'm going to go through here real quick how to work the graphing question on section 5.2. So first of all, make sure you graph the triangle on graph paper. And so here is a picture of those coordinates graphed. J is at 10, 0, H is at 0, 0, and K is at 0, 6. And they ask you to find the circumcenter. So if you remember back to the lesson that we went over, the circumcenter is made by perpendicular bisectors. And so when you are trying to find where is your circumcenter, you need to graph at least 2 of your perpendicular bisectors and find out where they intersect. So going back to perpendicular bisectors, in order to graph those, the first thing you need to do is find your midpoint. So pick a side that you want to draw the perpendicular bisector through and find the midpoint. Now, if it's a triangle like this one that has a vertical side and a horizontal side, I would suggest that you use those sides. They'll be easier to find your midpoint. You can just count. So for example, I'm going to find the perpendicular bisector of side HK. So I'm going to first find the midpoint of HK. That means when I look at HK, it is 6 units long, so therefore the midpoint would be at 3, half of 6. Second thing you want to do to draw in a perpendicular bisector is make sure that you have the opposite reciprocal slope. Again, this will be easy if it's a vertical or horizontal line, because a perpendicular line to a vertical line will be horizontal, or a perpendicular line to a horizontal line will be vertical. So in our case on HK, the line that would be perpendicular to our vertical line would be horizontal. So we can just draw this horizontal line, and that is our perpendicular bisector. Now, in order to find the circumcenter, you need to have at least 2 perpendicular bisectors so you can see where they cross. So again, now I'm going to go to HJ. I'm going to find the midpoint of it. The midpoint of HJ would be at halfway between 0 and 10, so that is 5. Plot that point. And then because it's horizontal, the line that would be perpendicular to it would be vertical. And so I can draw that vertical line through 5. And I see that these 2 lines cross at that point, and that point will be our circumcenter. So the coordinates for this point, which is our circumcenter, would be at 5, 3. So the answer to the question, what are the coordinates for the circumcenter, would be 5, 3. Notice, if you think back to what we learned the other day, this is a right triangle, and the circumcenter is always on the hypotenuse when it is a right triangle. And more specifically, it is always on the midpoint of the hypotenuse when it is a right triangle. So that fits with what we talked about when we first learned this lesson. Now, they're not always going to be nice and easy with a vertical and a horizontal side. So I'm going to go ahead and find the other perpendicular bisector just to show you what you would need to do if it was not vertical or horizontal. So you would still use the same 2 steps. You would first find the midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint of our diagonal side, KJ. And again, I'm going to repeat, you only have to do that only have to have 2 perpendicular bisectors to find out where they cross. I'm just doing this to show you what happens if you end up having not having any vertical or horizontal sides, and you need to find the perpendicular bisector to a diagonal side. So the midpoint of KJ, we would just use our midpoint formula using the coordinates of K and the coordinates of J. So the midpoint would be equal to 10 plus 0 divided by 2. And 0 plus 6 divided by 2. And so that gives us 10 divided by 2, comma, 6 divided by 2, which is 5, 3. So again, if we wanted to graph that perpendicular bisector, we would first plot that point, 5, 3, where the midpoint is. And then we would find the opposite reciprocal slope. So remember, the second step then would be to find the opposite reciprocal slope. So second, we want the perpendicular slope. So that means we need to find the slope of kj and then take the opposite reciprocal. Since it's on the graph, I can just count. To get from k to j, I would go down 6, which is negative, and right 10, which is positive. And so that gives me a negative 3/5. That means the slope I want needs to be perpendicular to it, so we're going to flip it and change the sign, and that gives us a positive 5/3. So I would go from the circumcenter, up 5, right 3, or down 5, left 3. Or down 5, left 3. And I could graph that line. Oops, I didn't cross that very good there. Pretend that went through the point. And so that would be our third perpendicular bisector. But again, notice it still goes through that same point, 5, 3. So those are your steps to finding the circumcenter on a graph. Find the midpoint, find the opposite reciprocal slope, graph 2 of your perpendicular bisectors, and find out where they cross. Make sure that you do write the answer as an ordered pair for that point, which is your circumcenter. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to the last question we didn't get to in the notes. We did very quickly the second to the last example. So I hope you understood that. If you didn't, I encourage you to call me. But we did not get to the very last example. So let me get there and I will go over how to work that problem. Oops, I am there. I went too far, so sorry. So this should be the last problem that was in your notes, and we did the one where it asked you to find the distance from P to MN. We did not do the last one that said find the measure of angle PMN. Going back to what's been given to us, I highly encourage you to mark your picture. MP is an angle bisector. So again, it's an angle bisector of the triangle, which means it's bisecting angle M. LP is an angle bisector. So that means it's bisecting an angle of this triangle L, splitting L into two congruent parts. And they want us to find the measure of angle PMN. PMN is this angle right here. So first thing we need to notice is the angle measurements that they have given us. Notice that on the red angle we have it is 50 degrees for PLN. So that means that the other angle that's congruent to it should also be 50 degrees, making the entire angle L 100 degrees. Also notice in the triangle that they gave us the measure of angle N, 20 degrees. So using the triangle sum theorem, we should be able to find this last missing angle, M. We know that all three angles in a triangle add to be 180. So we can take 100 plus 20, and we get 120. And then we can subtract that from 180, and we get 60. That means the measure of angle M is equal to 60 degrees. We are not looking for the entire angle. Remember, we're looking for what's in green, PMN, and we know that the PM is an angle bisector, so it's splitting that big angle M in half. So all we have to do is take that 60 degrees and divide it by 2 to get 30 degrees. So our missing angle PMN would be 30 degrees. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this short little video on the last two examples. And as always, I highly encourage you, call or text me if you have questions. Work together in class on Friday if you're watching this before Friday. Help each other, and good luck on your homework.